Before Dracula, before Nosferatu, before any of the monsters Hollywood ever sold you, there was a small village in 18th century Serbia, and there was a dead man who refused to stay dead. This is not a fairy tale. This is a documented historical account, recorded by a government official, published in a major newspaper, and read by terrified audiences across Europe. This is the true story of Petar Blagojevic, the vampire of Kisiljevo. The year was 1725. The village of Kisilova, known today as Kisiljevo, was a quiet, unremarkable settlement nestled in what is now Serbia, at the time under Austro-Hungarian rule. Petar Blagojevic was an ordinary man, a peasant, 63 years old. He had lived his whole life in this village, worked the land, known his neighbors. And then, sometime in the autumn of 1725, Petar Blagojevic died. Nobody remembered the cause. Nobody thought much of it. Death was common in peasant villages of that era. You died, you were buried, and life moved on. But in Kisiljevo, life did not move on. Within just 8 days of Petar's burial, 9 villagers were dead. 9 people in 8 days.
Each of them had fallen suddenly and violently ill. Each of them deteriorated within 24 hours, and each of them, on their deathbeds, gasping for their final breaths, told the same horrifying story. They said Petar Blagojevic had come to them in the night. They said he had grabbed them by the throat. They said he had pressed down on their chests until they couldn't breathe. 9 people, 9 deathbed confessions, all describing the same dead man. Then came the report that truly broke the village open. Petar Blagojevic's own widow came forward. She was shaking. She had not slept. She told officials that her dead husband had come home. Not in a dream, not a vision. She claimed he had physically walked through her door in the dead of night and asked her, calmly, deliberately, for his opanci, his shoes. She fled the village the very next day and never returned. But it didn't stop there. Another account emerged, darker than anything that had come before. A witness claimed that Petar had returned to his own home one night and demanded food from his son. When the young man refused, when he looked his dead father in the eye and said no, Petar reportedly attacked him, bit him, drained his blood, and left him for dead. Whether or not his son was among the 9 victims, history does not record. What it does record is this: an entire village was now paralyzed with terror. People refused to leave their homes after dark. They barricaded their doors. They lit fires through the night. They prayed. And then they made a decision that would echo across history. The villagers decided that Petar Blagojevic had to be dug up. Now, in the early 18th century, exhuming a corpse was not something you just did. The church frowned upon it. The law frowned upon it. It was the kind of thing that could land an entire village in serious trouble with the Austro-Hungarian authorities. So the villagers did something clever. They demanded that the local government official, a man called Imperial Provisor Frombald, attend the exhumation himself. They also demanded the local priest be present. Frombald tried to refuse. He insisted he needed written permission from the authorities in Belgrade. He pleaded, he reasoned, he stalled. The villagers didn't care. They told him in no uncertain terms that they were dealing with a vampire, and that if he didn't help them, they would abandon the village entirely. An abandoned village meant no taxes, no labor, no order. Frombald had no leverage. He gave in. They dug up Petar Blagojevic under torchlight. Frombald stood there and watched, and what he saw disturbed him deeply enough that he felt compelled to write it all down. In his official report, a document that still exists, Frombald described the condition of Petar Blagojevic's body. The corpse was not decomposed. For a man who had been dead and buried for over a week, the body showed almost no signs of decay. His hair had grown, his beard had grown, his nails had elongated where the old ones had peeled away, new ones had formed beneath them. And most disturbing of all, there was fresh blood in and around his mouth, not dried, not old, fresh. The villagers were beyond reason by this point. They were not waiting for Frombald's analysis. They were not interested in debate. They drove a wooden stake through Petar Blagojević's heart. And according to Frombald's written account, as the stake pierced the body, blood erupted from the corpse's ears and mouth, fresh, bright blood. The crowd didn't stop there. They pulled the body from the grave and they burned it, every last piece of it. They were making absolutely sure that whatever was inside that coffin could never come back. Frombald completed his report and sent it to the authorities in Belgrade. In the closing lines, he asked, almost desperately, that the government not hold him personally responsible for what had taken place. He described the villagers as beside themselves with fear and made the case that exhumation and staking had been the only reasonable options available. The authorities reviewed the report, and then they did nothing. No investigation, no charges, no reprisals. A staked and burned corpse in a Serbian village was apparently not worth further scrutiny. But the story didn't stay buried. Frombald's account was published in the Wienerisches Diarium, one of the most widely read newspapers in Vienna at the time. Within weeks, it had spread across Europe. Germany, France, England, everywhere it went, it ignited the same reaction: mass hysteria, a terror of vampires that gripped the continent for decades. Historians consider the Blagojevic case to be one of the first documented testimonies of vampire belief ever recorded by an official government source. It is, in part, what inspired writers like Bram Stoker, who gave the world Dracula more than a century later. Kisiljevo is still there today, a small, quiet village. The church still stands. People still live there. And underneath the soil, the history of what happened there in 1725 is still very much present. 9 people died in 8 days, all claiming the same dead man visited them in the night. A widow fled her home never to return after something knocked on her door. A government official, a rational, educated man, stood at that open grave and was shaken to his core by what he saw. You can explain away the biology, you can explain away the superstition, but can you explain why every single person in that village independently told the exact same story? If you made it this far, sleep well tonight.